Welcome to a discussion around the films in Program 4 in the competition. We have with us the filmmakers of Liberty and Ephemeral Institute, this is Rebecca Jane Arthur, Flowers Blooming in Our Throats by Eva Giolo, Earth in the Mouth by Ewelina Rosinska, and Glimpses from a Visit to Orkney in Summer 1995 by Aurand. There is one more film in the program, Surviving You Always by British filmmaker and artist Morgan Quintins, but he couldn't join us. So thank you so much, Rebecca, Eva, Ewelina, and Ute for coming together to discuss this really beautiful program. And I think it's really moving, and I mean, I hope that everyone who is watching this discussion will have watched the films before, because there are very beautiful connections and motives that go from one film to the other. And in particular, I think it's really the attention that you all give to touch and to hands and to textures and to tactility, which may be like, as if watching your films now after almost a year in lockdown, that sense of touch becomes really heightened. And except for Liberty and Ephemeral Institute, the first film in the program, which has a voiceover that guides it, like the rest of the three films that we are discussing don't really have a lot of spoken language. And I would say that Eva's one, Flowers Blooming in Our Throats, is the most radical in trying to say a lot without actually using words, but using hands instead. And so I wanted to start by asking Eva to talk about that like non-verbal hand language in her films, and maybe to talk also about the context in which it was made.
Sure. So the film was commissioned by Foundation in Between Art Film, which is a production company in Italy. And it was commissioned for a project titled Mascaria 19, Codes of Domestic Violence. And so the film was shot right after the first lockdown last summer, and with the Bolex. And very early in the process, I decided that I did not want to have any stories or just not use any words, and that I would just really focus on the daily gesture. To focus on hand gesture. So I film, it displayed like the hands of my family, some of my friends, like fellow artists based in Brussels. And the focus was very much that, the ambiguity of all of those daily gestures. The ambiguity and the contradiction of it as well, because the film is very much about the contradiction of what home can be. So a place of comfort and a place where one should definitely feel safe, but then while at once it can also be a place where one can feel invaded and abused. So the focus was very much the rhythm between all of those hands, and then the idea would be that I would just film them in different locations. So they all of those different houses and apartments, but at the end it feels they all kind of like, it creates that weird language in between them, in between the gesture, hopefully.
And can you maybe also talk about how much did you because you say like all these like hands or gestures coming together almost create a language of its own, and there are all these like repetitions and differences within the repetitions. So how much were those gestures planned or choreographed, or how much did they come about just by working with friends and trying things out in those domestic spaces?
Yeah, most of them were choreographed in a sense. Like I would just meet my friends and then I would just spend time with them, but like also I would make those lists of gesture that I had in mind, and then I would spend time with them and see what would feel natural to them to do, in a sense. So just to make sure that the gesture was also something which was daily, that they would actually do themselves, even if I wasn't there. But then the framing of the gesture of the places and stuff was very much directed. Yeah.
I thought watching all the films together in the program, and I thought that your film and Ewelina's film the titles seem to make like a beautiful poem together. This idea of earth in the mouth and then flowers that bloom in the throat. I also thought about the fact that you're both filming your friends and family and constructing through editing, but obviously, where was you're asking your friends to perform certain gestures, Ewelina is observing their lives and then constructing through editing. And so I wondered if Ewelina, if you could talk about that process of like filming over, I imagine, an extended period of time, and then constructing the film in the editing process, and about this. I mean, I wondered about the structure because it's in 7 chapters, and each chapter seems to have its own identity or mood. But I don't know if you could like say a bit more about it.
Yeah, I was filming for around 3 or 4 years, and it was very free filming because I'm part of the workshop run by Aurand, and there is only one rule in this workshop that one can get 1 roll per month of 30-meter, 16-millimeter film. So at some point I was filming every month a roll everywhere where I was going, but it was always I was not having a film in mind while I was filming. At some point when I collected quite a lot of material for me, I decided to kind of take seriously all the impulses that I had to film and put it together. And yes, the chapters, they have certain meaning for me, but I think also it was also kind of structural, that I also wanted to put a little breaks, because I imagine that it's a bit intense to watch it. So in one sense, these islands, they have a meaning for me, or they always have a certain mood. But also, the structural thing was also important for me to make little breaks between chapters.
But the structure came about in rewatching the material that you had been collecting over several years, or did you become aware of the structure while shooting?
No, it was everything already in the when I was editing, because I was editing kind of islands, and then when I had the feeling that it's enough in this piece, I was putting a break, but it was not while filming it. Everything, all these decisions I made in the editing process.
I wonder, like, maybe we can ask Ute about whether she follows the rules she imposes on her workshop participants. You were talking about that idea of filming without knowing what you're filming for, and then the film by Ute that we have in this program, the footage was collected 25 years before you edited it. So I suppose that you didn't know what you were going to do with it, and it only came to you when you were asked to pay tribute to Margaret Tate in the context of her centenary.
Yes, so I'm also a collector, so I have an archive of material which didn't find a place in the film. And when Sarah Neely asked me to contribute to the Margaret Tate 100 project, the film, I thought, I was thinking, what can I do? So in one hand, I could have made a completely new film connected to Margaret, but then I was going to my archive and looked at the footage which I had filmed in 95 when I was visiting her. And partly we filmed also together. So some of the footage I have filmed is in one film from 98, little bits, but there was a lot not. I mean, it was not a lot of footage, but so yeah, I went to the archive and looked, and then I decided I will construct the film around these bits of memory, these glimpses I have filmed. And the second part, the out of focus part, is filmed actually in 2005. for also another film, nothing to do with Tate, and then I thought it's nice weaving these abstract colors together with the concrete images of memory.
And how was that? I mean, how was your own personal process of remembering? Because I mean, I guess it's not only like, you know, looking through the footage and that editing, but then I guess it's also those images acting as like triggers of your own personal experience. And I mean, I was thinking about how there's this double archive, because it's your archive of footage that you go back to, but then the footage presents like an imaginary Margaret Tate archive, because you're dealing with the subject in her films, like the Orkney landscape, her house, the flowers, the animals.
Yes, yeah. But in this case, Maria, I didn't have too much to decide, because the footage which I didn't use is so tiny left. So I had only this footage. And this footage came out of a project, actually, when Margaret had this idea of filming video poems of the 90s, and we both went out filming together. And so it has this little structure of titles. One was, for instance, Rust Everywhere. So when we see her writing the number for the scene, or how do you call it, the shot, it was actually for this filming Rust Everywhere. And then I don't know, it was not, how can I say, the editing was actually finding a place, a montage, what is following what, and then finally come up with her in the end as a kind of high point. And so the footage directed me.
But I guess I mean, it's beautiful how we first encounter her through her hands, and then like the full Margaret Tate is revealed to us very, very briefly. And there is this sense of like, yes, I mean, the word you use in the title of glimpses of memory, which is all that's left, and which is the subject very much of Rebecca's film, Liberty and Ephemeral Institute, is a biography portrait of your mother. But I mean, it's like, I always find it really interesting that we don't know it's your mother until the very end of the film. I mean, we can sense that there is a close connection, but it's not clearly revealed. And as the only verbal film in the program begins with your mother's words and talking about, you know, the difficulty of remembering, which I feel is also, you know, expressed through Uta's blurred images. So Rebecca, do you want to talk about wanting to make a film with your mother, and how, and getting your mother also involved in the project?
Sure. To get her involved, let's say, I mean, I had this notion, I think for a while, that I would like to reflect on her travel stories that she told me when I was a child. So from my own memory, that I felt very shaped by what she had told me of her pre-mother story. I wanted to reflect on that then. You know, a stage of my life where I so the stories had also shaped my life to a certain degree. I mean, that's hinted at in the film when, you know, I'm mostly not present in the film, but at one point when she turns to me and said, like, you know, you must have experienced this too, this sort of sense of being alien in a foreign country. So I left that inside when she turns to me and said, but you would have felt like that too when you were living in Spain or Argentina or Mexico. So I left that in there as a sort of hint of that sort of notion of, like her memories are like, or her story that has this sort of lining, where my own is present. But this film, it's true that you don't perhaps realize that she's my mother until the end, but I thought that was also somehow necessary to let her be in her memories, and then she's just trying to recall them to you know, just trying to recall something of 40, almost 50 years ago. But and these things, they come to her, she describes in the film, as coming back as sort of glimpses, like in Uta's title, but like she describes it as sort of snapshots, as scenes are sparked throughout the everyday, and they're just glimpses of the past. And that in itself is a dialogue that also really helped me, that gave me a lot of freedom within the filming itself, to think about how I could possibly try to, capture a story that, I've never seen existing, or, how I could retrace anything that she'd done. And how I could sort of tap into that memory with her by looking perhaps at images of these places in a snapshot-like way. Does that sort of?
But because that gives a lot of the memories, or the voiceover narration seems to be triggered by going through this archive of like what's left from her years in America, the letters, the pictures, the address book. But then I was thinking that then, you go there and you recreate, like, you follow her footsteps across, you go to New York, and then you go to San Francisco, and then you film these places, and almost like try to imagine what your mother would have felt, seeing those places for the first time. And then I wonder, does that footage becomes archive as well? I mean, and you use 8mm, and that gives it this, out of time quality. And then I wonder, did watching those images also trigger memories for your mother, or had you already done the interview before you went to America to film?
Actually, I had started with the interviews beforehand, and they were sort of the beginning of the process where we were reflecting on this audio reel that she'd encountered whilst cleaning out her mother's house. And then, as it happened, it was from a tape that her father had made her from the 70s. So she of course could recall receiving the audio reel, but she couldn't remember exactly what was on it. So I digitized that, and that sort of opened up that space for reflection, actually, on that time, on that time in the 70s when she was living in New York, and that she'd left this small town place in Scotland, and then so to. Everything started with listening together to this audio, and then me sort of asking her to reflect on the notions of perhaps, why she left. I was also very interested in, but the amount of time we spent talking was quite sprawling. It was really about spending time with her also, and making time to understand things that perhaps, I'd recalled these stories as something else perhaps as a child, and now I wanted to understand them with a mature ear and mature understanding, and having gone through different things myself. So I wanted to readdress those things. But of course, it's difficult to, recapture the sparkle of, my memory within those stories. Or for her, it was difficult to tell a story with a microphone on for the sake of the microphone. And, we tried in many different ways. Sometimes she would make notes, but then that would turn out very flat, and very worded and scripted. And and those recordings I just couldn't use at all. The best moments were a bit, more ad hoc moments. And certainly the footage from the US, when I went on this quest with her little address book, that gave me different sort of points of departure, let's say, the address book. But also, whilst I was in New York, she was writing to me daily, giving me these sort of tours and maps to make my way around the city, and to, go to, Greenwich Village and see this all-woman hostel that she used to live in, and go to the bar next door that she used to work in, and go to Water Street, and go to Wall Street where she worked as a secretary. So I had all these places that I wanted to somehow revisit, but then, there was this notion of getting there and realizing, it's boarded up, or I'm not allowed to film there, or it's just a a big boring looking building, or there were all these sort of like mini disappointments as well, I would say, in that sort of retracing one's footsteps. But it was more, it was a sort of complex feeling towards these things. But when sort of taking that idea of just like filming in a sort of snapshot like way and bringing home this vibrating postcard for her, I knew that this would trigger something, and it certainly did. And it was kind of funny because she watched this footage of the US, and she watched like how I'd revisited lots of places or added new places, perhaps places that were unsafe for her in the 70s, like Central Park wasn't a place where one roamed around, or other sort of more periphery areas outside of Manhattan. But yeah, it did trigger a reaction, and it triggered a reaction in her where she got really annoyed that she was not present in the film footage that she was watching. And I was saying to her, yeah, but how can you possibly be present? I'm just showing you rushes, And there was no sound. And then she was just a bit confounded that I'd sort of cut out all of the stories she'd been telling me and all that effort she'd been exerting and reliving the past for me. And it was this brilliant moment, because then it created this dialogue in which she sort of, reclaims the film, and she says, yeah, but this is all projection, like this voices of the past are projection on the audio reel. These letters that you look at, that's like from a sort of immature correspondence that I had, and like it was more than that. And then that was wonderful, because then she kind of in one fell swoop kind of produced the dialogue that I'd sort of been hoping for, that kind of brought that synopsis, that I'd thought of in the beginning to the fore, and she brought all those points together about the complexity of, that adventure. It wasn't just adventure, it was also escape, it was also trying to rebuild, it was also, there was many elements to it. So the US footage was amazing for, helping sort of put these things into perspective as well. Yeah.
Because I guess that's the thing. The film is about so much more than just like your mom, and it does hint to all these like very difficult questions of class determinism, and this sense that like the like when she talks, I find that like really painful and moving when she talks about that sense of failing the 11 plus exam, and then like and then there is one route for her. Like she's going to finish school, she won't be able to go have a higher education, she won't be able to have, there are like certain jobs that she can have, and she has to get married and have children, and she breaks away from that. And there is this sense of breaking away of what is already mapped out for you as a woman in a certain in a social class at a specific time in like UK history. And I think those are like very powerful moments when she's talking about her situation within like a wider sociological context. But there is that sense of like there's two more than two places, but let's say her life in Scotland and the possibilities that America offers her, or this like sense of breaking away from the place where things are like mapped out for you, and being between places. And she talks a lot about that outsider perspective, and I think that's also something that's present in Ewelina's film, but in a less conflictive way. Like your film moves back and forth between your life in Berlin and filming also back at home in Poland. But I find like really beautiful and moving how these different aspects of your life don't seem to be in conflict with one another in the way that I think for Irene, for Rebecca's mother in the 70s, there is like such a violent conflict that she has to like leave. So could you talk about that moving back and forth and bringing everything together in such like great harmony?
Yes, I can. Well, it was in a conflict for a long time, these words of Poland and Germany, and I think this film also helped me to combine it, because I like reviewing the the footage, I was seeing that I have very, very different aspects of my life there, and I decided at some point that I for sure don't want to be, because I was tired of many things in Poland, like many, I don't know, the radical Catholicism or patriotism, but at some point I decided not to be judgmental with anyone, and I also realized that there are many similarities between people who live completely different lives. So when I decided it, when I recognized it, I was really enjoying this possibility of putting all these things together, and maybe also seeing myself as a connector of all these things. So this was kind of the proof for me that these things can go together, since I am experiencing them as one person. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's like, I don't remember if it's in the second or third chapter, but there is that amazing scene where you basically transform this church into a nightclub by the association of like sound and image, like those like church scenes, like I don't know, that they become like extremely modern. And I mean, as you say, this like this harmony that you yourself embody. But I think, yeah, a lot of the sound work is so important in your work, in bringing those, in making those connections, and making things not feel in conflict. And so, I mean, we talked about, collecting the images in Ute's workshop, Bolek's workshop, but then how about the collection of like sound and like the bringing together all those sounds and images?
I'm also trying to collect sounds. I was mainly working with my iPhone, so I was happy to have this very quick possibility of a device that I have always in my pocket, so I can be very quick. And when I was walking down some street and I heard something, I was just recording it. Some parts I recorded with also a little Zoom recorder, but actually this freedom of iPhone, it's amazing that I can capture anything, any time, without being prepared for it. Now I'm working more with Zoom, but yeah, I also like with the iPhone that the sounds are not so isolated, that everything is kind of mixed. But to answer your question, yeah, I think I collect sound in a kind of similar way, like images, and then I also put some music piece of some friends, or there is my father playing piano, or I also found some sounds on a internet websites with some sounds when I was missing a particular sound I wanted to put, so I was allowing myself to do it also. So it's a mixture, but the majority of the things is from my iPhone.
Eva, maybe we can like go back also to you with this question of sound, because it is, I mean, the sound work in your film is also very precise and very present, and it's often maybe what suggests the violence of the images or the violence of the gestures, because some of those, I mean, you talked about all these gestures that are ambiguous, that can be both like hands caressing each other, or maybe being more menacing or like hurting, but maybe it is the sound that introduces this sense of something disquieting, and I think the sound was a collaboration with an Italian composer. I mean, could you talk about that process of?
Yeah, sure. I think my video is delayed, but then so it was a collaboration with an Italian composer called Simonluca Leipega, and basically the sound at the very beginning, I just kind of wanted something. I wanted to deal with the sound in not a rational manner, or like I didn't want the sound to be so real, but like more kind of like emotional. And I wanted it to be very crisp and very just to make the image for the image to become very tactile in that sense. And we decided in the process, so there's those red filters coming in and out of the camera on a few of the images, and we kind of decided that so the sound would be also not stereo, but everything will be very much in the middle, in the screen, like in the where the gesture happens. And there's a very light background sound of something. You've got the impression that something is happening outside, or like that life is still being lived outside while it's still the confinement. And when the red filter comes in, basically the sound gets muffled. So there's that kind of like sense of isolation, or that something is happening, but it's very subtle. So it's like, I don't think it's, it's happening very slowly in a sense. No, and then I think it was just I just wanted the focus to be very, very much the gesture. So the sound was made like isolated from anything else, and very put at the front of the image as well.
But Ute, if we can like return to your film, because you decided not to use any sound, and to leave these images as they were.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. First of all, I didn't had any sound. I was looking for. I had the memory that I taped Margaret and Alex singing in the car when we were during my visit, but I couldn't find it. So I was first going if I have anything in my sound archive, but nothing there. So then it was easy actually for this film to decide it's silent, because the memory. Yeah, I like the. How can I say? It's more dreamy. It's more memory connected if it's silent. So it was not a big struggle to decide the film is silent.
And I guess just like Eva's film, which was a commission and had to respond to a brief. Did you feel that you had to that you had to reflect on Margaret Tate's work, or that you had like complete freedom to just also reflect on your like memory of her?
Yeah, no. I mean, there I felt free, but of course I had the advantage to the other ones that I had this footage, which was from the time when I visited her. So I had this big emotional impact. We see her, and it's really from the visit. So. Actually, it was good. It made me feel free. You know, I don't have to find an own film connected to her or resonating. So I think I would have found this much more difficult. So it was a good solution that I had the footage and decided to work with it. And no pressure from the commission, no pressure from Zara anyway. I mean, complete freedom.
Maybe I don't know if Eva is back in sync. Maybe we can see everyone. Because I guess in your case it's like a much more difficult brief to respond to in terms of a commission. I mean, it is like a very loaded subject, domestic violence during the pandemic, and you somehow manage to do it in a way that is very, very subtle and precise, and has this like weight, and at the same time the film is also very lively and beautiful, and shot in the summer with friends at like a brief moment in during the pandemic when such things were possible. And so how did you find that relationship of finding your own voice in relationship to to this Mascarilla 19 project?
Yeah, I think it was quite a big challenge, but yeah, I'm just very happy that at the end I ended up making this work, because at first it was supposed to be a work based on a personal archive that I have, and the curator was very eager for me to work with that archive, and I edited for a month, and at some point I was like, this is wrong, like this doesn't work for me, or it doesn't make sense, and it's also not exciting me. This project, I just don't feel it's not right. So very late in the process, I decided to change, and I was like, well, I'm going to do something else, and I'm going to work with those filters, and I'm going to focus on gesture, which was my very first idea. And it was great that the curator was very supportive and decided that he was just like, well, do whatever you want. Like, we'll just let you do what you feel it's right for this project. But it was challenging, I think, but it was also a good challenge to still deal with that subject, which is, of course, a very important subject, but then I felt it was also a difficult subject for me to talk about because, of course, it's something that I don't know much about. So I wanted to make a work that could speak about it, but also which would be very delicate. I mean, in a sense, like that would just it could also be a work about many other things, and for me, it's also a work about many other things than that. So that subject is there, but it's also, I think, a lot of people would see the work, and if they don't know that's a commission for that project, that they might not even know. I don't know if that answers, but yeah.
Because there is all that ambiguity, and I think one can see, and it's also like it's going back to Rebecca's film and her mother. I mean, this idea of projections and what we project onto it. And as I was, saying with watching Ewelina's film, I mean, I also had that very strongly watching your film. The sense of touch, being so heightened because of watching it at a moment in time when we're not allowed to touch each other. Maybe I think we're almost beginning to run out of time, but I just wanted to return to Rebecca before the end to talk about also that relationship between self and project and reenacting your mother's steps and having to confront your mother with that reenactment and that relationship between her memories and your projection of her memories and your project about her life. And so maybe if we could end with some words about your mother's reaction to the finished film, because you talked about how she reacted to the rushes and how that became like an important part of the actual making of the film.
Yeah, sure. Well, my mother is a very strong character, which is brilliant, and which makes her also a really great sort of raconteur. She can tell a story, and she has a lot of sense of humor, and she's also very direct. She'll be very direct with me. Like when starting the story, like to record her, it started a lot with audio, and there were so many tangents that this film could have taken. But yeah, and there was also so many stories shared. But like that sort of process of making it and listening to the stories, I very much felt like, oh, these stories are for me. They're for me forever. They're also for my nieces. Because these recordings are still there. But then in the end, I used the footage of the States to somehow, replace or tell another story, or tell part of some more impressionistic part of her story, rather than actual accounts of her taking the Staten Island ferry, which she so articulately worded for me and many different times. She wanted me to have that sense of excitement that she felt. She was a bit disappointed in the end that the images took the place of her stories. And she thought, well, it's a funny idea to have this building on Wall Street and not to know that I worked in there, and people don't understand why we're in Staten Island, or why we're on Staten Island, or why we're going to Manhattan, and those kind of little gripes. They really kind of annoyed her, but it kind of it provoked more discussion, in fact. but I mean, she did appreciate this sense of, you know, here and there, then and now. She thought that that balance was in order, but, you know, there were definitely points of improvement, you know, if it had been her film. So, and she wasn't shy of saying them. And like in a sense with my mother, like another film could always be with her, is her kind of trying to conduct the film itself, you know, like, because there's so many of those moments where she's like, oh, I would cut that, like that's a bit dark, I wouldn't use that, I would take that, that's kind of nice, but only for a second, you know. And those kind of moments are really hilarious, and I had them in the film at first, but then I removed them because it was, in the end, it became less about me trying to make this film with my mother, and it just became more her, you know. It's like, just to formulate more, like, just give her the space, even though she would have loved more audio space, it seemed like, just to give her that space of letting that story be, and then removing the sort of playful struggle between mother and daughter. But that was certainly there. Yeah.
And then I guess it's nice to think that maybe in 20 years that can be like archived to revisit and make another film about the struggle between mother and daughter. Well, thank you so much. I think we are reaching our like the limit of the time that has been given to us, but it's been like really great to see you all and to be able to hear you talk about the film. So thank you so much for being here, and also for sharing your films with the festival.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.